Netanyahu has a real problem. If he stops this war, it will be time for accountability. The military has to conduct, assessment of its performance. The government will be answerable to the people. The citizens will call for elections. So Netanyahu feels that war helps him in survival.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Welcome once again to this edition of IAIS podcast. We are glad to have with us this afternoon a distinguished personality, scholar, none other than Dr Muslim Imran, who is a Palestinian academic and an activist also. He is the director of the Asian Middle East Center for Research and Dialogue. He holds a PhD in Malaysian foreign policy and has written extensively on international affairs, particularly with regards to the Palestinian issue. Welcome, Dr. Muslim.
Thank you,
I'll call you Brother Muslim.
Sure.
And you are from Palestine itself. You hail from Palestine. Thank you for having made yourself available for today's session. And today, of course, considering his expertise in the field of Palestinian issues, I will focus my discussion on the developments that are happening currently in that region, particularly Gaza, and following what has been I think it's now about 3 weeks now since the infamous statement made by the American president regarding the forced expulsion of the Gaza population from Gaza to the countries which he mentioned, particularly Jordan and Egypt, and to turn the Gaza Strip into what he termed as a Riviera. Of course, by now this particular subject has somewhat cooled down a bit, and there seems to be a response from the Arab world, the Muslim world. So I would like to get your views on this particular aspect of the developments that have been happening, particularly as a Palestinian. How do you look at this thing? Please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Latiff, for having me in this podcast, and thanks to IAIS. The story of the Palestinians has many facets, many sides. One of it is suffering, definitely. And the last 15 months witnessed one of the most painful experiences for the Palestinian people. A genocide was perpetrated against the Palestinians.
Yes.
And the whole world stood idle watching this genocide. But the Palestinian story has also other sides. It has the side of struggle and heroism, I would say. The young Palestinian men and women would not sit by and let all these massacres and crimes happen to them, to their people, without response. The Palestinians have shown resilience throughout the past year or so, and they stood their grounds, especially in the Gaza Strip, in spite of the genocide. They stayed on, they fought back, and they denied Israel, in spite of all of its powers and might, they denied Israel victory. So I would say that these two sides are very, very clear for any observer. Now, with the recent, announcements of President Trump and his administration, it is very clear that the Palestinians and the Middle East is going to face more pressure in the coming years. And we're talking about 4 years of his administration. It's not going to be easy. However, I have to also be objective. The war on Gaza is not an Israeli war. It was more of an American war from day one. If you remember, in October 2023, a few days after the October 7 military attack on Israeli sites in the envelope of Gaza, it was basically President Biden declaring war on the Palestinians. He flew himself to Israel to lead the war cabinet, something unthinkable. You could just imagine if there is a war anywhere else, and then a foreign power, the leader of a foreign power, comes over to declare war on the other side. Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister of Britain, flew to Israel on a military aircraft, shipping loads of bombs to bomb the Gaza Strip. Almost every major Western power declared war on the Palestinians. So the war on Gaza throughout the past 14, 15 months was not an Israeli war. It was a Western war on the Palestinian people. For the past 7 decades, the Western world has enabled Israel to commit and perpetrate crimes against the Palestinians. But in the last few months, we have seen a new display of, I would say, Western imperialism. They enabled Israel to commit genocide. They provided the bombs, they provided the bullets, they provided the weapons, they provided the drones, they provided intelligence sharing, they provided, according to so many reports, manpower, mercenaries from all corners, to help Israel finish off the Palestinian people in Gaza and the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. Now, people talk about President Trump coming up with the forced migration plan and trying to impose it on Arab countries. But I would disagree. I would say it wasn't Trump's idea. This idea is an extreme right-wing idea that existed in the Israeli discourse. If anybody flips through Israeli newspapers before October 2023, you will see the word transfer being repeated almost on daily basis, not by marginal political figures, but by mainstream Israeli political leaders inside the Israeli parliament itself, in the Knesset. Such plans have been in discussion from day one. In fact, the very Zionist movement is an extremist expansionist movement which wants to finish off its enemies. So the problem in what happened over the last 1 year is that the Americans tried to achieve what Israeli right-wing wanted. President Biden's administration facilitated the genocide, and Anthony Blinken, the former Secretary of State, traveled around the Middle East extensively in October, November, and January, December, and January 2024, with the clear purpose of achieving Israel's plans. And Israel's plan was to force people of Gaza outside of Gaza. And when a lot of reports came out that Blinken is actually promoting the idea of forced displacement of the Palestinians, Blinken in January came out and said, no, we're not doing that. He denied. But anybody with a few cables in the Middle East knows very well that Blinken himself was trying to sell the idea of forcing out Palestinians from Gaza, sending them to Egypt, Jordan, and other countries. Arab countries refused this plan, of course. The Palestinians themselves refused this plan. They stayed, in under bombardment for almost a year because they refused such plan. Now, fast forward to the current era. President Trump is only saying what was being discussed in closed doors, behind closed doors.
He's more open.
He's very open. He is well known actually for this style of politics.
Yeah,
he is a populist from one angle, but he is also a very confrontational leader. He wants to achieve deals everywhere, and he applies maximum pressure to achieve his interests. Now, the way he perceives his interests in the Middle East is to align with the extreme right-wing Israeli political spectrum, not with Netanyahu particularly. I would say that Trump's team when it comes to the Middle East and foreign policy is more in line with extreme right-wing Israeli political groups.
You are saying it as if in Israel there are two groups. The extreme Netanyahu is not in that particular. Wouldn't you put Netanyahu also in the same extremist?
Okay. He is an extremist, definitely. But in Israeli context, while the right wing dominates the Israeli politics, Netanyahu has shifted from an extreme right-wing position to a center-right position, not because he changed his views, he's still the same radical he was 30 years ago, but because the extreme right-wing is flourishing in Israel. So people like Ben-Gvir, former national security minister, Smotrich, the current finance minister, these people used to be frowned upon within Israel 30 years ago. They used to be considered extreme radicals, terrorists. They used to be framed as terrorists within the Israeli judicial system itself, not by the Palestinians. For the Palestinians, every Zionist is an extremist. Because Zionism is about abolishing Palestine, about wiping out the Palestinian people and taking over Palestine. Stating as a state of Israel. But there are people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich who are now seen as extremists, used to be considered terrorists by the Israeli law itself. Smotrich was jailed in Israel because of his terrorist activities. Now, Netanyahu used to be considered extreme right. Today, the Israeli left is history. They cannot pull together 4 or 5 seats in the parliament. The whole entire Israeli left. The right wing is dominating. So within the context of the right wing, Netanyahu now is becoming the mainstream. People like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are more extreme. They are doomsday believers. They want to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque. They want to build the so-called Temple of Solomon. They want to speed up the end of day kind of fantasies. I think Trump's team, when it comes to foreign policy, aligns with these people, not with Netanyahu. They would like to see the end of time come. They would like to see the doomsday happen. They are trying to speed it up. They believe in such prophecies. So Trump speaks very openly about his support for this kind of mentality. Now, why is he doing that? This deserves a separate podcast to discuss. But I personally subscribe to the theory that Trump is having an uphill task within America itself. He's trying to dismantle the deep state. He's trying to create his own state, a white evangelical state.
Christian Zionist.
Yes, a Christian Zionist state in America itself. So he's giving the Zionist lobby in the US and these extremist neocons, he's giving them the Middle East to play with. While at the same time, he and people like Elon Musk are dismantling the deep state in the United States. They are dismantling agencies like USAID. Of course, we all know about that now. They are dismantling, I think, agencies like the CIA and other American security arms, or at least transforming them. Why? Of course, not for the best interest of the Muslim world, but they are doing that because they believe that these agencies are very corrupt and have been squandering and wasting American taxpayers' money. And I've been reading reports the past 2 days about the size of corruption that such agencies have financial corruption. So Trump wants to dismantle these, and he's giving the Middle East to the Zionist lobby, which probably was involved in many of these agencies. This is one theory. Might be true. Might not be true, but the behavior that we see now in the Middle East is Trump enabling the extreme right-wing Israeli groups to take over. Now, what do these groups want? They want to wipe out the entire Palestinian population, either by forced displacement or by killing or by any other means. And Smotrich was very, very blunt and arrogant in putting it this way a few years ago, even before October 2023. He said the Palestinians in the West Bank have one of 3 choices: either to surrender to whatever Israeli policies we impose on them, or to leave, or to face death. This kind of policy is now in place. We have seen that in Gaza.
It's going on now, especially with the current situation in the occupied West Bank, in Jenin, and what you see, it's like they're rushing to do what, because they know that the resistance itself, the Palestinian resistance is very strong. They want to achieve something within the 4 years that Trump will be as president, so that their goal of establishing what they want will take place. Do you think that's the...
I think they are trying to take advantage of Trump's administration and trying to achieve as much as they can from their ethnic cleansing policies. But I have to say that the amounting resistance, the growing resistance of the Palestinian people and their supporters is also a big challenge that they are unable to overcome. Let's try to make a simple comparison between the situation of the Palestinian struggle 8 years ago and the situation of the Palestinian struggle today. In 1947, 1948, when the Zionist militias committed ethnic cleansing, the Palestinians were practically defenseless for many, many months. We didn't have our own indigenous resistance because the British dismantled every aspect of Palestinian resistance. They exiled our political leadership, Haj Amin al-Husseini and the higher Arab committees. They practically charged any Palestinian who held a gun or any piece of arm. They sentenced them to death sentence, and they executed Palestinian people for possession of any kind of arms. Meanwhile, the British colonization of Palestine, the 30 years of British colonization, facilitated the establishment of the State of Israel. They helped the Zionist militias who came from across the world to Palestine to set up their own institutions, to pick up arms. They served in the British military. So by 1947, the Palestinians were practically slaughtered like sheep. We had nothing to defend ourselves. Fast forward in 2023, when the Palestinian resistance took military action, things were very different. The Palestinians continue until today to resist in Gaza and in the West Bank. Israel has been unable to declare victory in spite of the huge military arsenal it has and the huge military supply that it gets from the US and other allies. And in spite of the billions, tens of billions of dollars of American military aid that have been flowing into Israel, they are unable to control one small neighborhood in Gaza. They are unable to control the Jenin refugee camp, for instance, in the West Bank, in spite of all of the arms they have, because of the Palestinian resistance. This is a major difference. In addition to that, the allies of the Palestinians in 1947, 1948, the Arab armies came in very late, maybe 7-8 months into the genocide. They stepped up and tried to save Palestine, but they were in a disarray. They were disorganized. They were ill-equipped, ill-trained. Most of them were newly independent Arab states. So they completely relied on the colonial masters to actually arm them to fight Israel, which made no sense. The chief commander of the whole Arab army that fought against the British, against the Israeli occupation, was a British officer. So it was a joke. But today, the Palestinians continued to fight, and their allies are also expressing full support. The Yemenis, a few days ago, made it public that if Israel is to continue its genocide in Gaza, we will continue to launch hypersonic rockets onto Israel. The other resistance groups like Hezbollah and others are also making it public that if Israel wants to continue in the genocide, we will continue in supporting the resistance. So the balance of power is shifting. We are not as powerful as Israel, but we are not as weak as we were in 1948.
Now, coming back to that issue on that, the cleaning up part. I mean, of course, as you were saying, that this is Trump's way of creating some kind of a wave, which of course he's got his motives behind it. Of course, he's also a businessman, as we all acknowledge, he's a businessman. But so the Arabs, of course, as you were saying, the leaders were very upset. I mean, that's what the initial reaction was. And you could see that the Jordanian king and also the president of Egypt, they rejected the outright the proposal. So, and they are going to have a meeting. I heard that it would be soon in the 27th of this month to discuss the Arab response. What do you think the Arab response will be like?
You see, Biden was a committed Zionist.
Okay.
He helped Israel throughout his administration, but he still gave face to the Arab leaders. He did not embarrass them. At least in Biden's political thought, the Arab leaders were allies of the United States. They were, to a large extent, facilitating the American foreign policy in the Middle East. So he would still give them some space. He was considerate. He wouldn't embarrass them publicly. Trump has a different view.
Yes.
He does not care about anybody apart from himself. So even allies, for ways, it's understandable that you embarrass your enemies and foes. But in the case of Trump, he is as hard on his allies as he is on his enemies. Look at the way he has been speaking about Canada, for instance.
Yes.
NATO and other allies. So I'm sure American allies are panicking. Not only its adversaries. In the case of the American adversaries, it doesn't make much difference. Biden and Trump were still adversaries.
Yes.
Countries like North Korea or Iran,
China.
or many countries in the global south, America was still tough on them.
Yeah.
Be it Biden or Trump. But in the case of many so-called moderate Arab regimes, Trump is bad news. Because at least during the time of Biden, when they did nothing to save Gaza, when they did nothing to end the genocide, in the case of many of them, they were even complicit in the genocide. Biden covered that. He still did not publicly embarrass them. But Trump is putting them on the pedestal and exposing their weaknesses before their own populations. And this, of course, is a source of worry for the entire Arab leadership, because they don't want to see Arab Spring 2.0.
Yeah.
To show, there is zero democracy in the Arab world. I mean, it's an open secret. Yes, we all know that.
Yeah.
The Arab population doesn't elect its leaders. So for Arab leaders, sources of legitimacy are various. The elections is not one of them. So other sources of legitimacy become very important. For instance, your foreign policy, economic development, and other sources of legitimacy. When you have zero democracy, other sources of legitimacy become more important. Then suddenly comes the leader of the superpower, the leader of the United States, your supposedly strongest ally, and starts exposing you. You are weak. They're exposing the Arab leaders to their population as weak leaders. So they're worried. And they are now, thinking about what to do next. They're calling for an Arab summit very soon. It was supposed to be on the 27th, but it's postponed now to March, a few days later. And it tells you about how serious they are when it comes to helping the Palestinians. They are more worried about their
own position,
image, their position, than the lives of tens of thousands of Palestinians, which is not new. The Palestinians have gotten used to disappointment when it comes to Arab leadership.
Yes, but the thing is, this time around, I think, for far too long, we know since ever the Arab leadership came into power, in whatever form and in whatever way, they have always been very. Of course, at one time, during the Cold War, some of the Arab countries were aligned to the Soviet Union, some were to the Americans. But now it is wholesale to the Americans and the West. So, do you think that, because, like you were saying, Trump is not thinking of the welfare of the Arab leaders at all. He's not, unless it will give him some returns. But otherwise, they have got nothing to do with him. So their positions have become very weak as far as not just the Arab populations, their own people, not giving them the support. But now you have another factor. The American leadership is also not very keen to say that, oh, we will keep you in position and, look after you so that you will remain. So they are caught between these two situations. Would that not be something good for in a different way for the Palestinians? Because a change in the leadership, if there is a popular leadership rising out of the popular movement and bringing leadership that will align with the interests of the Arab masses, including the Palestinians, that would be something good.
Maybe if you take a long-term historical perspective, yes. But
Yes.
if you take an immediate approach to the situation in the Middle East, a geopolitical approach, no, such pressure is actually a problem for the Palestinian issue. The Arab leaders were weak, and they were unable to do anything about the genocide in Gaza. Now, an additional external pressure comes and is applied on these weak Arab leaders, so the situation for the Palestinians is going to get worse. It's not going to get better. But in the long term, if this is going to result into a positive change within the attitudes of Arab leadership, maybe. But that's also not guaranteed, because sometimes people think that regime change will eventually bring about a stronger leadership. That's not necessarily, because look at many cases in the Middle East. The leadership was weak, but not friendly to the Israelis and the Americans. Then when it is replaced with the new leadership is closer to the Americans than the Israelis. That applies to many cases in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm not calling for destabilization of the Middle East. I don't think that's going to solve our problem. I believe the Muslim countries should, get closer, should work together, should cooperate. I believe in good governance. I believe in democracy, but I don't believe in forced democracy and foreign intervention to replace regimes. We've seen that in Iraq. It was disastrous. So I would rather see Arab leaders stepping up and acting in better ways, but it's not happening.
So, and there's another aspect to this Palestinian, the situation now. Of course, Palestinians don't have support except from, like you were saying, other resistance groups like Hezbollah and of course a few countries. So, but the problem now, even the Muslim world is fractured along sometimes sectarian lines, and sometimes this has been exploited for a long time by the West, playing on the sectarian and ensuring that there's no Muslim unity to face the Israeli threat. But with current developments taking place, don't you think now is the time for them to, for example, I was reading the statement by the Iranian leadership, which was telling the Saudi Arabia that that they will, they are steadfast in this move to ensure that the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in Gaza would not take place. That they will stand, and they appreciated the stand taken by the Arab leaders in rejecting the proposal. So, do you think that there's some kind of something hopeful in that sense?
I would say, of course, the many challenges that the Muslim world has been through in the last few decades should bring about more maturity on the part of the leadership and the people. But that's not always the case. And I do believe that there are differences within the Muslim world, but it's a part of the healthy diversity that we should all celebrate and build on. Look at Malaysia, for instance. Malaysia is a very diverse society. You have people from very different ethnic backgrounds, different religions, different cultures, different histories, but they get along. There are differences, of course, but they get along, they cooperate, they build a nation, they build a civilization. we in the Muslim world have lesser diversity than Malaysia as a country has,
Yes.
or than Indonesia as a country has. Why is Malaysia and Indonesia, able to prosper and progress, and the Muslim world in general falls into enmity and divisions and unhealthy competition? Of course, it's in part because of the quality of leadership that we have in the Muslim world, but it's also because of external interventions. The foreign powers, especially some of the Western powers, which are still run by the same colonial mentality, they still try to pick up, on the colonial policies and to interfere within the Muslim world. So sectarianism becomes a serious problem when it could be managed. It could be managed. It shouldn't prevent Muslims from working together. Now, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, one of the ways and the tools used by Israel to weaken any response against its policies is playing on the sectarian card. So you see them, sometimes if you check on social media, Israel has this cyber
troopers,
committee or division called 8,200, I think.
Yes, 8,000.
You will find people on Twitter pretending to be, for instance, Palestinians condemning Saudi Arabia, pretending to be Emiratis condemning Qatar, pretending to be Iranian condemning Iraq, and so on. They play this game. Why should we fall into that? We have to be smarter. They use this to weaken us. So when Iran comes in to support Palestine, when Yemen comes in to support Palestine, when the Iraqis and Hezbollah come to support Palestine, you will find a lot of useful idiots, but useful for Israel, coming up with the sectarian card, playing the sectarian card, talking about issues that happened 1,000 years ago, instead of focusing on the now. At the time of genocide, we have to put aside our differences and come together. Muslim, Christian, Sunni, Shia, even Jewish, Buddhist. It's a genocide. It's a huge massacre of innocents.
It's a humanitarian.
It's humanitarian. Our differences should not block cooperation. We have to work together to stop the Israeli genocide. So I feel that many of these differences are being played on by the Israelis. It's natural to have differences, but what's not natural is to be stupid enough to fall into the plots of your enemies and to fight over smaller differences when there is a genocide to stop.
There's another thing which is quite interesting. The Israeli onslaught on Gaza, 15 months, very long, and it was, of course, on the side of the Palestinians, very painful. The suffering, the death, and destruction was untold. But it also must have given repercussions on the Israeli society as a whole. Of course, the Israelis always claim that the land that they have is a land which has been promised by God, and that is a safe haven and everything. After what has happened, after 15 months of this ongoing situation, still, I don't think that the Israelis feel safe. Israel can never be considered a safe place for what they claim as Jews. So what do you think about that?
I think the 15 months of genocide and also 15 months of strong Palestinian resistance have certainly had a lot of impact on Israel, whether domestically, the Israeli society, or internationally. But I would say that the effect and the impact is more on the outside. Internationally, Israel now is seen as a pariah state. It's being charged in ICJ for genocide. Its leaders are being charged in ICC for war crimes. You look at social media and how people perceive anybody from Israel. People feel disgust when they hear the name of Israel. You watch a lot of videos of stand-up comedians, of the layman in the street. People, when they hear Israel, they quickly think of genocide. It's synonymous with genocide. So that's very difficult to change. Israel has been digging its own grave. It has been its worst enemy.
Yes.
Nobody could do to Israel what it has done to itself.
To itself, yes.
But at the same time, the genocide, as well as the steadfastness of the Palestinians, has also had some impact on the Israeli society. And the main impact is fear. The Israeli society is fearful. It's so divided, even before the war. It continues to be divided. But now they feel the sense of
insecurity.
There's no trust. The Israeli society doesn't trust its own military, which failed miserably on October 7 to protect itself, let alone its own society. They don't have faith in their own government. They see their prime minister as one of the biggest liars in the world.
Yes.
They have no faith in the political establishment, in the judicial system, in the media. This development is also very unprecedented. But I would not count on the Israeli people to make a change, because I think the Israeli society is infected by fascism. And when a society is brainwashed and is drunk with power and fascism, it's very difficult to have hopes and expectations on them. I think to wait for the Israeli society to wake up and change its leadership and bring about better policies is a waste of time. The better thing is to continue to impose sanctions on the Israeli state and the Israeli regime to help in dismantling the system of apartheid and dismantling this extremist fascist ideology of Zionism. This was done, for instance, against Nazi Germany. It was defeated militarily, and eventually the ideology was changed. In the case of Israel, to wait the Israelis to wake up in one good morning and feel bad for their genocide in Gaza, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Although I believe that the Jewish faith itself has been misused by the Zionist movement to commit crimes of genocide and other horrible crimes. I don't think the Israelite prophets called for such crimes. But the Zionist political movement has misinterpreted and has misused religious scriptures. So the Palestinians would be very glad to live in peace in their own homeland with anybody else.
Yes.
Except that Israel as a state is the opposite of all of that.
Yes. Just one last point. We are coming to the end of the podcast. Right now, the ceasefire is still holding, and Ramadan is coming. So, but it's already coming to the end of the first phase of the ceasefire, and reports say that most likely it will continue to the next stage. But of course, Netanyahu doesn't want the ceasefire. If we read all the reports, he wants to go back to war. What is holding him back, and do you think it will hold, or what's your take on that?
Netanyahu has a real problem. If he stops this war, it will be time for accountability. The military has to conduct, assessment of its performance. The government will be answerable to the people. The citizens will call for elections. So Netanyahu feels that war helps him in survival, in political survival. He has so many corruption cases going on. His coalition is very fragile. One of his partners used to extort him and at the end quit the coalition, Ben Gvir. So Netanyahu is not in a very stable position. He needs war to stay in power. But at the same time, the Israeli military, the Israeli establishment knows very well that continuation of war comes with expenses.
Yes.
Not only financial expenses, but also loss of soldiers. According to a report on Al Jazeera very recently, the Israeli military has lost 6,000 soldiers in the war in Gaza. This is unprecedented in the history of Israel. According to a friend that I had a conversation with yesterday, a political analyst and international relations expert, he said it's impossible to be only 6,000. He said he estimates that at least 15,000 Israeli soldiers were killed in action in Gaza. Because, for instance,
It's a huge number.
more than 1,100 Israeli military vehicles were blown up into pieces in Gaza. Each one of them would have 4 or 5 people in, or more.
Yeah.
But anyway, the war in Gaza comes with costs. Yes, the humanitarian cost is very huge in Gaza. Palestinian people have suffered a lot, but Israel is digging its own grave, because for Israel to survive in the Middle East, it has to come to terms with the region. It has to make peace with its own neighbors. First of all, the Palestinian people. But if it is unable to make peace with any of these parties, neither with the Palestinians, nor with the Syrians, nor with the Lebanese, nor with the Jordanians and Egyptians, who are supposed to be peace allies.
Peace allies.
Israel is unable to make peace with any of them, and is losing soldiers on daily basis, and is losing face on daily basis. So it's digging its own grave. That's why I don't think rational people in Israel will let Netanyahu continue this war. I think the pressure on him to end the war domestically in Israel will start to mount and rise. And Trump is pushing everybody in the Middle East, but he's also pushing Netanyahu. He was the main factor that forced Netanyahu to actually sign a ceasefire deal about a month ago, because he felt that it was a pointless war. You keep bombing civilians and you are unable to defeat the resistance. What kind of war is that? That's just plain stupid. So Trump himself pressured Netanyahu to stop the war.
So I think we have had a wonderful discussion, and we hope that the Palestinians will eventually, in the time to come, not too far away, will get the freedom. Palestine will be established, inshallah. So thank you very much for your insightful views on, and it was very exciting to learn. There are so many new things which we have gotten from your discussion just now. So we thank Dr. Muslim, Brother Muslim, for his very interesting analysis on the situation now in the Middle East, particularly with regards to Palestine. Inshallah, I think we will have other sessions with him in the near future. Once again, to all our viewers and to our listeners, thank you for having followed this podcast by IAIS Malaysia. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.